The rain came down in sheets across Interstate 10, turning the desert highway into a river of asphalt and reflected headlights. Marcus Stone hunched over his coffee at table 17 in the Blue Mesa Diner, watching water stream down the window like tears on glass. 45 years had carved deep lines into his face, each one a story he'd never
You can't
tell.
just barge in
The
here
leather
like you own
vest
the
he wore
place. I
bore
go
the
where I please.
patches
You got a
and
problem with
colors
that?
of the Hells Angels marks
You
of a
think you can just walk
brotherhood that
away?
had defined
I don't
most of
want
his
any
adult
trouble.
life.
Move,
But today
now.
those colors felt heavier than usual, weighted down by memories he couldn't shake. The diner was one of those forgotten places that existed solely for travelers who needed a break from the endless Arizona desert. Faded turquoise booths lined the walls, their vinyl cracked and repaired with duct tape. A jukebox in the corner played country songs nobody had requested, and the smell of burnt coffee mixed with frying bacon hung thick in the air. Sarah Mitchell approached his table with a pot of fresh coffee. She'd been working at the Blue Mesa for 23 years, her name tag as worn as her smile. Gray streaks ran through her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "Refill, hon?" she asked, already tilting the pot toward his cup. Marcus nodded, sliding his mug forward. "Thanks, Sarah. This weather's something else." She topped off his coffee, glancing out at the storm. "Good for business, though. Nobody wants to drive in this mess." Marcus's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. Sarah never asked questions, never pushed. That's why he'd been stopping at this diner for the better part of a decade whenever his rides brought him through this stretch of Arizona. The bell above the door chimed, and a gust of wet wind swept through the diner. Marcus looked up, his instincts sharp as always. A man entered, pulling a small girl behind him. Something in Marcus's gut immediately tightened. The man was maybe 40, with nervous eyes that darted around the diner like a trapped animal looking for exits. His clothes were too new, too clean, especially for someone traveling in this weather. The jacket he wore still had creases from the store. But it was the girl that made Marcus set down his coffee with careful deliberation. She couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years old. Blonde hair fell limply around a pale face that seemed too small, too fragile. She wore a pink sweater that hung loose on her thin frame, and her jeans were dirty at the knees. The man's grip on her wrist was too tight. The girl's eyes were downcast, her shoulders hunched forward in a way that spoke of learned helplessness. Marcus had seen that posture before, too many times. The pair settled into a booth across the diner. The man's movements were jerky, impatient. He pulled out his phone, checked it, shoved it back in his pocket. His leg bounced under the table, keeping rhythm with some internal anxiety. The girl slid into her seat without a sound. She didn't look around, didn't reach for the menu, didn't do any of the things a normal child would do in a restaurant. She simply sat there, small and still, like she was trying to disappear. Marcus pretended to focus on his newspaper, but his eyes tracked every movement at that booth. Years on the road had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now those instincts were screaming that something was very, very wrong. When the man got up to use the restroom, Marcus caught a clearer glimpse of the girl's face. His stomach dropped. Faint scratches marked her right cheek, angry red lines that looked fresh. Her bottom lip was swollen, and there was a purple shadow beneath her left eye that no amount of fear could hide. Her clothes, now that Marcus looked closer, were wrinkled and slightly too big, hanging off her small frame like she'd been wearing them for days. The pink sweater had a stain on the collar that might have been blood. The man returned, sliding back into the booth with a harsh whisper to the girl. She shrank away, her shoulders hunching even further, as if trying to make herself invisible. Marcus noticed her hands trembling as she reached for a glass of water. Outside, the rain picked up, drumming harder against the windows. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the lights in the diner flickered briefly. Sarah passed by Marcus's table again, her experienced eyes also tracking to the strange pair across the room. She caught Marcus's gaze and something unspoken passed between them. She'd noticed it too. "Anything else I can get you?" Sarah asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Just watching the storm." Marcus replied quietly, his eyes never leaving the booth where the man and girl sat. The man leaned across the table saying something Marcus couldn't hear. The girl's face went even paler, if that was possible. Her eyes darted around the diner, landing briefly on Marcus before quickly looking away. That fleeting glance hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd seen that look before, 8 years ago in a parking lot in Nevada. A woman named Jessica Morgan, with bruises poorly hidden under makeup and terror in her eyes. She'd looked at Marcus just like that, a desperate, silent plea for help, and Marcus had walked away. 2 days later, they found Jessica's body in a drainage ditch outside Las Vegas. The news said she might have been saved if someone had spoken up sooner, if someone had noticed. If someone like Marcus had cared enough to do something. The guilt from that moment had followed him for 8 years, waking him up at night in cold sweats, making him question what kind of man he really was beneath all the leather and patches. Marcus set down his coffee mug, suddenly aware that his hand had tightened around it so much his knuckles had turned white. Not again, not this time. Sarah approached the booth where the man and girl sat, her notepad ready. "What can I get you folks?" The man barely looked up from his phone. "Coffee for me, apple juice for her." "And to eat," Sarah's voice remained professionally pleasant, but Marcus could hear the slight edge of concern. "Just drinks," the man snapped. "We're not staying long." Sarah's eyes flicked to the girl who sat perfectly still, staring at the table. "You sure, honey? We've got some great pancakes. Kids love 'em." The girl's eyes widened slightly at the mention of food, a flash of hunger crossing her face before she quickly looked down again. "She said she's not hungry." The man cut in, his voice hard. "Just bring the drinks." Sarah nodded slowly, her lips pressed into a thin line. As she walked away, Marcus saw her pull out her phone behind the counter, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. The man's phone buzzed. He grabbed it, read something, and his face tightened with what looked like anger or fear. Maybe both. He typed a quick response, then shoved the phone away again. His foot now tapped against the floor, quick and impatient. He kept checking the parking lot through the rain-streaked windows, as if expecting someone. Marcus shifted in his seat, angling himself to keep the pair in clear view without being obvious. The leather of his vest creaked softly as he moved. The drinks arrived. Sarah placed them on the table with careful gentleness, her eyes lingering on the girl's scratched face. "You let me know if you need anything else," Sarah said, her words directed at the girl rather than the man. The girl reached for her apple juice with both hands, careful not to spill a drop. When she sipped, Marcus noticed how the man watched her with impatience, not concern. Not the way a father watches a daughter, not the way anyone should watch a child. The diner door opened again, bringing in an elderly couple shaking rain from their umbrellas. The distraction drew everyone's attention momentarily. Everyone except Marcus, who kept his eyes on the girl. In that brief moment, when the man's attention shifted to the newcomers, the girl's eyes lifted. For just a heartbeat, she looked directly at Marcus. Her gaze was clear, intelligent, and filled with quiet terror, a silent plea that needed no words. Then, as quickly as it happened, she lowered her eyes again, becoming once more the invisible child the man clearly wanted her to be. Marcus's hand tightened around his coffee mug. He knew that look. He'd seen it before and walked away. Never again. A cold draft swept through the diner as another customer pushed through the door. The clock above the counter ticked past 3:30. The afternoon rush was over, leaving just a handful of patrons scattered across the booths and tables. Marcus took a slow sip of his coffee, which had gone lukewarm. He made no move to leave. Sarah moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her sensible shoes squeaking softly on the linoleum floor. She approached the man and girl's table again. "Sure, I can't get you anything to eat, maybe some fries for the little one." The man's jaw clenched. "We're fine." But the girl's eyes betrayed her. They flickered to the basket of bread on a nearby table, showing a flash of hunger before settling back into that mask of careful blankness. Marcus noticed. And he noticed that Sarah noticed too. Sarah walked back to the counter, making a show of wiping it down while her eyes stayed on the booth. She pulled out her phone again this time, holding it where Marcus could see. She tilted the screen toward him. On it was an Amber Alert notification. Missing Emma Rose Peterson, age 5. Last seen 4 days ago at Desert Sky Mall, Phoenix, Arizona. Blonde hair, blue eyes, 3 feet 2 inches, wearing pink sweater and jeans. Believed to be with unknown male suspect, white 40s, brown hair. Consider armed and dangerous. Below was a photo, a little girl with a gap-toothed smile and bright eyes wearing the same pink sweater, now dirty and wrinkled on the child across the diner. Marcus's blood ran cold. Sarah's eyes met his across the counter. She gave the slightest nod, then casually walked toward the back hallway where the restrooms were located, where she could make a call without being seen. Marcus understood. The police were coming. He just needed to make sure the man didn't leave before they arrived. The man was checking his watch now, growing more agitated by the minute. He leaned across the table and whispered something to Emma. Her small body went rigid, her fingers digging into the vinyl seat. Marcus stood up slowly, stretching his back like a man who'd been sitting too long. His leather vest creaked, and he made sure to catch the man's eye as he walked toward the counter. The man's gaze followed Marcus, taking in the patches the size the weathered face that had seen too many fights. Something flickered in his expression. Wariness, maybe fear. Good. Marcus reached the counter and called out to Sarah loud enough for the whole diner to hear. "Sarah, you got any more of that apple pie? I'm thinking a slice would hit the spot." Sarah emerged from the back hallway, her face carefully composed. "Sure thing, hon. Coming right up." As she cut the pie, she murmured under her breath, 5 minutes. They're 5 minutes out. 5 minutes. Marcus could work with that. He took his pie back to his table, but this time he didn't sit facing the window. He sat facing the door. And the booth where Emma sat with her captor. The man noticed the change. His leg bounced faster under the table. He pulled out his phone again, typed something quickly, then stood abruptly. "We need to go," he told Emma, his voice tight with poorly concealed panic. Emma's eyes widened. She looked at her untouched apple juice, then at Marcus. For a split second, their eyes met. In that moment, Marcus saw everything. The fear, the hope, the desperate, silent question. "Will you help me?" Marcus gave the smallest nod. "Yes." The man grabbed Emma's wrist and pulled her roughly from the booth. She stumbled, nearly falling, but caught herself against the table. "Careful there," Marcus called out, his deep voice carrying across the diner. "Don't want the little one getting hurt." The man froze. Every customer in the diner turned to look. "Mind your own business," the man said, but his voice cracked on the last word. Marcus slowly stood, his full height and breath suddenly filling the space. "Thing is," he said calmly, "when I see a man being rough with the child, it becomes my business." The man's face flushed red. "She's my daughter." "That's so." Marcus took a step closer, careful and deliberate. "Funny thing about that, I've been riding through Arizona for 20 years. Know most folks are around here. Never seen you before." "We're from out of state," the man stammered, backing toward the door, pulling Emma with him. Out of state, Marcus repeated, taking another step. Like Phoenix, maybe? The man's face went pale. His hand moved toward his jacket pocket. I wouldn't, Marcus said quietly, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. In the distance, barely audible over the rain, came the sound of sirens. The man heard them too. His eyes went wild, darting between Marcus the door and the approaching sound of salvation. Let the girl go, Marcus said, his voice steady, commanding. You're not leaving with her. Get out of my way. The man's voice rose to a shout. His hand fumbled in his jacket pocket. Marcus moved faster than a man his size should be able to move. 25 years of street fights and survival instincts took over. He closed the distance in 2 strides, his large hand clamping down on the man's wrists before he could pull whatever was in that pocket. I said, Marcus growled, let her go. The man's grip on Emma's wrist finally loosened. She stumbled backward, free, but frozen in fear. The diner door burst open. 2 uniformed officers rushed in, hands on their holsters. Police, nobody move! The man tried to wrench free from Marcus's grip, but it was like trying to escape iron. Marcus held him until the first officer reached them, then slowly released his hold, raising his hands to show he wasn't a threat. This man has been holding a child against her will, Marcus said evenly. That's Emma Rose Peterson. There's an Amber Alert out for her. The female officer, tall, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, immediately moved to Emma while her partner handcuffed the man. You have the right to remain silent, the younger officer began, but the man wasn't listening. He was screaming obscenities, struggling against the handcuffs, making threats nobody was paying attention to. Emma stood trembling in the middle of the diner floor, her small frame shaking like a leaf in a storm. The female officer knelt down to her level, her voice gentle. Emma, my name is Officer Brooks. You're safe now. Nobody's going to hurt you anymore. Emma's eyes were wide, unblinking. She didn't respond, didn't move, just stood there, frozen in the moment between terror and relief. Marcus watched from a few feet away, his heart pounding harder than it had during the confrontation. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. This time he hadn't walked away. Sarah appeared at his side, her hand briefly touching his arm. You did good, she whispered. But Marcus couldn't take his eyes off Emma, the girl who'd been brave enough to write help on a napkin and trust a stranger to see it. The girl who'd given him a chance at redemption he didn't deserve. The man was being dragged out to the patrol car, still screaming threats. The rain swallowed his voice as the door closed behind them. Officer Brooks tried again to reach Emma. Sweetheart, can you tell me your name? Emma's lips moved, but no sound came out. Her eyes remained fixed on the floor. It's okay, Officer Brooks said softly. You don't have to talk right now. Let's just get you somewhere safe and warm, okay? Emma didn't respond, didn't acknowledge the words at all. Sarah stepped forward with a blanket from the first aid kit behind the counter. She might be in shock, she said quietly. Poor baby's been through hell. Officer Brooks wrapped the blanket gently around Emma's shoulders. We're going to take you to the hospital, Emma, just to make sure you're okay. Is that all right? Still no response. Emma's breathing was shallow, her small chest rising and falling in quick, panicked rhythms. Marcus couldn't help himself. He took a step closer, then knelt down, making himself smaller, less threatening. Emma, he said softly. For the first time since the police arrived, Emma's eyes moved. They found Marcus's face, and something flickered in their depths. Recognition, maybe even trust. You're safe now, Marcus told her, his rough voice gentler than it had been in years. These police officers, they're going to take care of you. Make sure you get back to your mom. At the word mom, Emma's eyes filled with tears. One spilled over, running down her scratched cheek. "That's right," Officer Brooks said, her own voice thick with emotion. "We're going to find your mom, Emma. She's been looking for you every single day since you disappeared." More tears fell, silent and heartbreaking. Marcus slowly reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a clean handkerchief. He held it out to Emma, not moving closer, letting her decide. After a long moment, Emma's small hand reached out. She took the handkerchief and pressed it to her face. "You're the bravest kid I have ever met," Marcus said. "You know that what you did today, asking for help, that took real courage." Emma lowered the handkerchief slightly, her eyes meeting his again. "I'm going to make sure you get where you need to go," Marcus promised. "Okay." The smallest nod. Barely perceptible, but it was there. Officer Brooks helped Emma toward the door, the blanket wrapped around her like armor. Before they stepped outside into the rain, Emma turned back one more time. Her eyes found Marcus in the crowded diner among all the strangers and chaos, and held his gaze for one more heartbeat. Then she was gone, guided gently into the warmth of the patrol car. Marcus stood slowly, his knees creaking in protest. Around him, the diner was buzzing with excited conversation. Other customers were pulling out their phones, probably already posting about what they'd witnessed. But Marcus felt hollow, empty in a way he couldn't quite name. Sarah appeared at his side again, this time with a fresh cup of coffee. "You gonna be okay?" Marcus took the cup without answering. His hands were shaking slightly, the adrenaline finally wearing off. "The police are going to want a statement," Sarah continued. "Both of us probably." "Yeah." Marcus's voice came out rough. He cleared his throat. "Yeah, I know." Through the window, he watched the patrol car pull away, red and blue lights flashing against the rain-soaked pavement. Somewhere in that car was a little girl who'd been missing for 4 days. A little girl who'd been brave enough to ask for help. And for the first time in 8 years, Marcus had been brave enough to answer. The second patrol car arrived 10 minutes later. Detective Laura Brooks, no relation to the officer who'd taken Emma, stepped into the diner with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested she'd been doing this job for a long time. She was in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and graying hair cut short and practical. She wore a dark blazer over her badge and gun, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd seen the worst humanity had to offer and still showed up for work every day. "I'm looking for Marcus Stone and Sarah Mitchell," she announced to the room at large. Marcus raised his hand from his booth. "Here." Sarah stepped forward from behind the counter. "That's me." Detective Brooks nodded, pulling out a chair at Marcus's table. "Mind if I sit? We need to talk about what happened here today." For the next hour, Marcus and Sarah recounted everything. The way the man had entered with Emma, the scratches on her face, the way she'd written help on a napkin and dropped it near Marcus's table. Detective Brooks took notes in a worn leather notebook, her pen moving quickly across the pages. She asked questions specific and probing about times and descriptions and exact words spoken. "The man you subdued," she said finally, "his name is Kyle Brenner. At least that's what his fake ID says. We're running his fingerprints now, but I can tell you this isn't his first time." Marcus felt his stomach turn. "What do you mean?" "We've been tracking a human trafficking ring operating across 5 states," Detective Brooks explained, her voice grim. "Targeting vulnerable children, foster kids, runaways, kids snatched from public places like Emma. They move them quickly, use different vehicles, fake documents. Very organized." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God." "The vehicle Brenner was driving," Detective Brooks continued, "it's registered to a shell company in Nevada. We found restraints in the trunk, sedatives, everything they'd need to transport a child across state lines without anyone noticing. Marcus's hands clenched into fists on the table. Where is Emma now? Phoenix Children's Hospital, Detective Brooks said. We need to make sure she's physically okay before we can reunite her with her family. Her mother, Sarah asked hopefully. Detective Brooks hesitated. That's where things get complicated. We've been trying to contact Jennifer Rose Emma's mother, but the number we have isn't working. The address listed on the Amber Alert comes back to an apartment building in Phoenix, but according to the property manager, nobody named Jennifer Rose has lived there in over a year. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What are you saying? I'm saying the Amber Alert might not have been filed by Emma's real family, Detective Brooks said carefully. It might have been filed by the trafficking ring themselves to throw off anyone who found her. The implications hung heavy in the air. So nobody's looking for her. Sarah's voice cracked. She's been missing for 4 days and nobody actually cares. We don't know that yet, Detective Brooks said firmly. We're running Emma's DNA and fingerprints through every database we have. We'll find out who she really is and where she really came from. But it takes time. Marcus stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. How much time? Could be hours, could be days. Detective Brooks looked up at him steadily. I know this is frustrating, Mr. Stone, but you did everything right today. You saved that little girl's life. Did I? Marcus's voice was rough with emotion. Or did I just buy her a few more hours before she disappears back into a system that clearly failed her the first time? Marcus, Sarah said softly, but he was already moving toward the door. I need some air. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The desert sky was clearing, revealing strips of orange and purple as the sun began its descent. Marcus stood in the parking lot, breathing in the wet smell of sage and creosote. His motorcycle sat where he'd left it, chrome gleaming with rainwater. He could get on it right now. Right away, let the police handle everything. He'd done his part, but when he closed his eyes, all he saw was Emma's face. Those frightened blue eyes, the trembling hands clutching his handkerchief, the smallest nod of trust. The diner door opened behind him. Detective Brooks stepped out, lighting a cigarette. Didn't peg you for a smoker, Marcus said without turning around. I quit 5 years ago. She took a long drag, but some cases make you remember why you started in the first place. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of fire. She's not talking, Detective Brooks said finally. Emma, the doctors say it's selective mutism, common in trauma cases, especially children. She physically can talk, but psychologically she can't. Marcus turned to face her. How long does that last? Depends on the child, the trauma, the support system. Detective Brooks flicked ash from her cigarette. Sometimes days, sometimes years. What happens to her if you can't find her family? Foster care, emergency placement at first, then hopefully something more permanent. Detective Brooks met his eyes. I know what you're thinking, that the system failed her, and you're probably right, but it's all we've got. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then can I see her? Detective Brooks raised an eyebrow. At the hospital? Yeah. Why? Because she trusted me, and I can't just walk away like she doesn't matter. Detective Brooks studied him, her sharp eyes seeing far more than Marcus was comfortable with. Finally, she nodded. I'll make some calls. No promises, but I'll see what I can do. She stubbed out her cigarette. Phoenix Children's Hospital is 2 hours from here. If they let you visit, it'll be brief and supervised. That's fine. Can I ask you something, Mr. Stone? Detective Brooks's voice was gentler now. Why do you care this much? Most people would have walked away by now. Marcus thought about Jessica Morgan. about the parking lot in Nevada and the choice he'd made to ignore her silent plea for help, about the guilt that had haunted him for 8 years. Because I didn't help someone once, he said finally, when I should have. And she died because of it. Detective Brooks nodded slowly, understanding in her eyes. Well, you helped today. Remember that. She headed back inside, leaving Marcus alone with the desert sunset and the weight of decisions both past and present. His phone buzzed, a text from Sarah, going to hospital with Emma. They need someone familiar. Want me to tell her you're coming? Marcus stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed back, yeah, tell her I'll be there soon. He climbed onto his motorcycle, the familiar weight and balance of it grounding him. The engine roared to life, rumbling through the quiet parking lot. As he pulled onto the highway heading toward Phoenix, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed in ways he couldn't yet understand. That a little girl with blonde hair and frightened eyes had given him something he thought he'd lost forever. A second chance. The Phoenix Children's Hospital rose against the twilight sky like a fortress of glass and steel. Marcus parked his motorcycle in the visitor lot, the engine's rumble fading into the ambient noise of the city. His hands gripped the handlebars for a moment longer than necessary, gathering his nerve. He'd faced down rival gangs, walked into police stations, ridden through storms that would have killed lesser men. But walking into a children's hospital to see a traumatized 5-year-old girl, that terrified him. The automatic doors parted with a soft hiss. Inside the lobby was all soft colors and gentle lighting, designed to soothe frightened children and worried parents. A volunteer at the information desk looked up as Marcus approached, her eyes widening slightly at his appearance. I'm here to see Emma Rose Peterson, Marcus said, keeping his voice low and respectful. Detective Brooks called ahead. The volunteer checked her computer, then nodded. Fourth floor pediatric wing. Room 412. You'll need to check in with the nurses station. The elevator ride felt impossibly long. Marcus watched the numbers climb each floor another step toward or something he didn't fully understand. Why did he feel this crushing need to see Emma, to make sure she was truly safe? The fourth floor opened into a hallway decorated with cartoon animals and bright murals. Nurses moved efficiently between rooms, their soft-soled shoes squeaking on the polished linoleum. Marcus found the nurse's station where a young nurse with kind eyes looked up from her charts. Can I help you? I'm Marcus Stone. Detective Brooks said I could visit Emma Peterson. Recognition flickered across her face. Oh yes, you're the one who found her. She stood gesturing down the hall. She's in 412, but I should warn you, she hasn't spoken since she arrived. Not a single word. Marcus nodded, his throat tight. And Mr. Stone, the nurse touched his arm gently. Thank you for what you did. Room 412 was partially open light, spilling into the hallway. Marcus paused at the threshold, suddenly unsure. What was he supposed to say? How was he supposed to help? Sarah sat in a chair by the bed, holding Emma's hand. She looked up when Marcus appeared in the doorway, relief washing over her face. Marcus, she said softly, I was hoping you'd come. Emma was sitting up in the hospital bed, looking impossibly small against the white sheets. She wore a pale blue hospital gown that was far too big, and someone had combed her hair, pulling it back with a pink clip. The scratches on her face had been cleaned and treated, but they still looked angry and painful. But it was her eyes that stopped Marcus cold. They were open but empty, staring at nothing, completely detached from the world around her. Emma, Sarah said gently, Marcus is here to see you. No reaction. Emma didn't even blink. Marcus stepped into the room, slowly moving like he was approaching a frightened animal. Hey there, Emma. Still nothing. The girl might as well have been made of stone. It's okay, Sarah said softly. You don't have to talk right now. Let's just get you somewhere safe and warm, okay? Marcus pulled a chair close to the bed, but not too close. He sat down carefully, his leather vest creaking. For a long moment, he simply sat there, not speaking, not demanding anything, just being present. I brought you something, he finally said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small stuffed teddy bear, brown and soft with kind button eyes. He'd stopped at a gift shop on the way, feeling foolish but unable to shake the impulse. Figured you might want some company tonight, Marcus said, holding the bear where Emma could see it without forcing her to look. His name's, well, he doesn't have a name yet. Thought maybe you could pick one when you're VD. He placed the bear on the bed, not in Emma's lap or hands, just close enough that she could reach it if she wanted. Emma's eyes flickered. Just the slightest movement, but Marcus saw it. Her gaze shifted from nothing to the bear lingering there for a heartbeat before retreating back to emptiness. Progress. When I was a kid, Marcus said, moving a half step closer, I had a tough time sleeping in new places. Still do sometimes. He glanced around the sterile hospital room with its unfamiliar sounds and smells. Thought this little guy might help. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the steady rhythm of the heart monitor. Marcus didn't expect a response, but he kept talking anyway, his deep voice gentle in the quiet room. Bears are good protectors, you know. They look soft, but they're actually pretty fierce when they need to be. He studied the stuffed animal in his hands. This one's job is to keep bad dreams away. At least that's what I heard. Marcus looked up at Emma again. Her eyes remained distant, unfocused, but he noticed her hands had tightened slightly on the blanket. The tiniest of movements, but it was something. I don't want to bother you, he said. Just wanted to check that you're okay. Sarah from the diner was asking about you. She's worried too. Marcus took another careful step forward. He was close enough now to place the bear on the bed, but far enough that Emma wouldn't feel crowded. I'm going to leave you in right here, Marcus explained slowly, extending his arm to place a teddy bear at the foot of her bed. He set it down gently, making sure it was sitting upright, its button eyes facing her. He'll keep watch while you sleep. The bear looked small against the white hospital blanket, its fuzzy brown fur a splash of warmth in the clinical room. Marcus stood back suddenly, unsure what else to say. His 5 minutes were nearly up, and he'd done what he came to do, seen that she was physically safe, if not emotionally whole. I'll go now, he said quietly. Let you get some rest. He turned and walked back toward the door, his boots making soft thuds against the linoleum floor. At the doorway, he paused and looked back one last time, a strange reluctance to leave tugging at him. In that moment, something shifted. Emma's eyes moved for the first time since he'd entered the room. They lifted slowly from their vacant stare and found him standing at the threshold. For a brief electric second, her gaze locked with his, clear, present, and unmistakably aware. Marcus felt his breath catch. He gave her the smallest nod, a silent promise that he'd return. Then he stepped into the hallway, the weight of her gaze still lingering on him like a physical touch. Sarah joined him a moment later, her expression worried. She's been like that since they brought her in. The doctors say it could be days before she comes out of it. Marcus nodded, unable to find words. The image of Emma's empty eyes haunted him. You did good coming here, Sarah continued. Even if she can't show it, I think it helps, knowing she's not alone. They walked to the elevator together, both lost in thought. As the doors closed, Marcus caught one last glimpse of the pediatric wing. All its bright colors and cheerful decorations is meant to comfort children who'd seen things no child should see. The drive back to his motel was a blur. Marcus's mind kept replaying Emma's face, the vacant stare, the brief moment when she truly looked at him. What horrors was she reliving behind those eyes? What nightmares would wake her in the dark? His motel room was exactly as he'd left it, sparse and temporary. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing his leather vest, and pulled out his phone. A missed call from Detective Brooks. He called her back. "Stone," she answered. "I was hoping you'd call. We got some preliminary results back." Marcus's heart rate spiked. And Kyle Brenner's real name is Kyle Anthony Brenner. He's wanted in 3 states for trafficking and assault. The FBI's getting involved. This is bigger than we initially thought. How big? They're calling it a multi-state trafficking operation. At least 20 known associates, possibly more. Brooks's voice was grim. Brenner was mid-level, which means there are people above him calling the shots. And Emma's family. Still working on it. The Amber Alert was definitely fake filed with false information. We're running her DNA through every database we have, but it takes time. Marcus felt frustration building. So she's alone. For now, but we're not giving up. Neither should you. Brooks paused. How was she at the hospital? Not talking, barely moving. It's like she's not even there. Trauma does that, Brooks said softly. The mind protects itself by shutting down. She'll come back, but it takes time and patience. After hanging up, Marcus lay back on the bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Sleep felt impossible, but eventually exhaustion pulled him under into dreams filled with frightened eyes and silent pleas for help. The next morning arrived too quickly. Marcus was back at the hospital by 7, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He found Sarah already there, looking exhausted but determined. "You look like hell," Marcus said, handing her the coffee. "Speak for yourself." But she smiled, accepting the cup gratefully. She had nightmares, woke up screaming 3 times, wouldn't let the nurses near her. Marcus's jaw tightened. "But she let you stay. She held my hand so tight I couldn't have left if I wanted to." Sarah took a sip of coffee. "The night nurse said it's normal. The nightmares might continue for a while." Marcus pulled his chair close to the bed. "Morning, Emma." Emma's eyes shifted to him. The teddy bear was still in her arms, slightly more worn-looking from a night of desperate clutching. "Rough night?" Marcus asked gently. The smallest nod. "Progress." Yesterday she'd barely acknowledged his presence. Today she was responding. The door opened and a woman in a dark suit entered, carrying a leather portfolio. She was maybe 50, with gray-streaked hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Stone, I'm Agent Patricia Morrison, FBI." She extended her hand. Marcus stood, shaking her hand firmly. "Marcus," Agent Morrison turned to Emma with a gentle smile. "Hello, sweetheart. I'm going to help find your family, okay?" Emma didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge Morrison's presence. Morrison pulled Sarah and Marcus outside the room, keeping her voice low. "We've made some progress. Kyle Brenner's real name is Kyle Anthony Brenner, wanted in 3 states for trafficking and assault. He's part of a larger organization we've been tracking for 18 months. "How large?" Marcus asked. "At least 20 members across 5 states. They target vulnerable children, foster kids, runaways, kids from broken homes. They move them through a network of safe houses before selling them." Morrison's jaw tightened. "It's sophisticated, well-funded, and extremely dangerous." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, God." "The good news is that Brenner's capture is a significant break in our investigation. He was a mid-level operator, which means he has information about the higher-ups." Morrison glanced back at Emma's room. "The bad news is he's not talking. At all. Won't even admit to knowing Emma." "So we're nowhere," Marcus said flatly. "Not nowhere," Morrison corrected. "We're running Emma's DNA through every database we have. Missing children unidentified remains ancestry records." If she's been reported missing by legitimate family members, we'll find them. And if she hasn't been, Sarah asked. Morrison's expression softened. Then we'll do everything we can to place her in a safe, loving home. But first things first, let's find out who she really is. A nurse appeared with a food tray, soft foods, the kind gentle on a stomach that hadn't eaten properly in days. Sarah took it, thanking her, and carried it back into Emma's room. Morrison studied Marcus with those sharp FBI eyes. Detective Brooks told me what you did at the diner. That was brave. It was what anyone should do. But most people don't. Morrison pulled out a business card. I'd like to ask you some questions to our audience, if you're willing, about what you observed. Sometimes witnesses remember details they don't realize are important. Marcus took the card. I'll help any way I can. Good. Morrison started to leave, then paused. Mr. Stone, Emma's lucky you were there today. Remember that. After Morrison left, Marcus returned to Emma's room. Sarah was trying to coax her to eat, holding up a spoonful of applesauce. Just a little bite, sweetheart, Sarah encouraged. You need your strength. Emma stared at the spoon but made no move to open her mouth. Marcus sat back down in his chair. Mind if I try? Sarah handed him the spoon, a mixture of hope and skepticism on her face. Marcus held the applesauce, but he didn't bring it to Emma's mouth. Instead, he set it down on the tray and picked up his own spoon, dipping it into the cup. You know what I learned a long time ago, he said, pretending to examine the applesauce. Food tastes better when you're not being forced to eat it. He took a bite himself, making an exaggerated face of consideration. Not bad. Little sweet for my taste, but not bad. Emma's eyes tracked to him, watching. When I was a kid, Marcus continued, setting down a spoon and picking up hers. I used to hate when people told me I had to eat, made me want to eat even less. He held Emma's spoon but didn't bring it toward her, just held it casual and unthreatening. So I'm not going to tell you that you have to eat this. That's your choice. He met her eyes, seeing a flicker of something behind the emptiness. But I will tell you that your body's been through a lot, and food helps it heal, helps you get strong again. He placed the spoon on the tray within Emma's reach. So whenever you're ready, it's here. No pressure, no rules, just whenever you decide. Emma stared at the spoon for a long moment. Then so slowly, Marcus almost missed it, her hand crept across the blanket. Her small fingers wrapped around the spoon's handle. She brought it to her mouth and took the tiniest bite. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Marcus felt his own throat tighten. Emma took another bite, then another. Not much, just a few spoonfuls, but it was something. It was progress. When she was done, Emma set down the spoon and looked directly at Marcus. For the first time since the diner, truly looked at him, seeing him, acknowledging him. She didn't speak, but she reached for the teddy bear Marcus had brought, pulling it close to her chest. Good choice, Marcus said softly. He's a good protector. The smallest nod, barely there but unmistakable. Sarah wiped her eyes, smiling through her tears. I think someone's found a friend. As the morning wore on, Marcus and Sarah took turns sitting with Emma. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, administering medications. Through it all, Emma remained mostly silent, but she seemed calmer with the bear in her arms and Marcus nearby. Around 10 o'clock, a doctor entered, a kind-faced woman in her 50s with graying red hair. I'm Dr. Reynolds, she introduced herself. I've been overseeing Emma's care. She examined Emma, gently speaking in soft, reassuring tones, even though Emma didn't respond. After the exam, she gestured for Marcus and Sarah to follow her outside. Physically, she's going to be fine, Dr. Reynolds said. She's malnourished and shows signs of dehydration, but nothing that won't heal with proper care and nutrition. The scratches on her face are superficial. And psychologically, Sarah asked. Dr. Reynolds' expression grew more serious. That's more complicated. The selective mutism is a trauma response. Her mind is protecting her from having to process what happened by shutting down communication. It's not uncommon in children who've experienced severe trauma. Will she talk again? Marcus heard the worry in his own voice. Most likely, yes, but it requires patience, safety, and consistency. She needs to feel truly secure before her mind will allow her to open up again. Dr. Reynolds glanced back at Emma's room. The fact that she's responded to you both is actually very encouraging. It means she's capable of trust even after everything she's been through. Over the next few days, Marcus fell into a routine. He'd arrive at the hospital early, spend hours sitting with Emma, reading to her, or just being present. Sarah came when she could between shifts at the diner. Together, they formed a protective bubble around the little girl who had no one else. Emma slowly began to emerge from her shell. She started eating more, sleeping better. The nightmares didn't stop, but they became less frequent. And while she still didn't speak, she communicated in other ways. A nod, a shake of the head, the slightest smile when Marcus did voices while reading. On the third day, Agent Morrison returned with news. "We got a hit on the DNA," she said, pulling up information on her tablet. Ancestry database, consumer genetic testing. She showed Marcus and Sarah a family tree on the screen, branches spreading out with names and dates. Emma's DNA matched with a woman named Jennifer Rose. Maternal match 99.9%. Her mother, Sarah breathed. Yes, but here's where it gets complicated. Morrison pulled up another file. Jennifer Rose was reported missing 6 months ago from her home in Flagstaff, Arizona. She never returned from her shift at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. Her car was found abandoned at a rest stop off Interstate 40. Marcus felt cold dread settling in his stomach. And Emma? According to Jennifer's missing person report, she had a 5-year-old daughter, Emma Rose. Both mother and daughter disappeared the same day. Morrison's expression was grim. The investigation went cold. No leads, no witnesses, nothing. Until now, Sarah said quietly. Until now, Morrison confirmed. The fact that we've found Emma alive suggests Jennifer might be too. Or, Marcus said darkly, she's dead and Emma was taken by the people who killed her. Morrison didn't deny it. It's a possibility we have to consider, but I'm choosing to remain optimistic. If they wanted to kill Emma, they would have done it already. They kept her alive for a reason. To sell her, Marcus said flatly. Possibly, which means they might have kept Jennifer alive too for different reasons. Morrison pulled up another file. We've contacted Flagstaff PD. They're reopening Jennifer's case, cross-referencing with our trafficking investigation. What about other family? Sarah asked. Grandparents, aunts, uncles? Morrison shook her head. Jennifer was an only child, parents deceased. Emma's father died 3 years ago in a car accident. As far as we can tell, Emma has no living relatives except her mother. Marcus thought about Emma being cared for by nurses and doctors, but surrounded by strangers. Did she remember her mother? Did she understand that Jennifer might still be out there somewhere, searching for her? Does Emma know, he asked, about her mother? Not yet. We wanted to confirm everything first. Morrison closed her tablet. But we'll need to tell her soon. It might help her remember what happened. Or it might traumatize her all over again, Marcus said. It's a risk, Morrison admitted. But right now, Emma is our best source of information. If she can remember anything about the day she and her mother disappeared, it could help us find Jennifer. Marcus felt anger rising. She's 5 years old and she's been through hell. You're not going to interrogate her like a witness. Morrison held up her hands. That's not what I'm suggesting. We'd have a child psychologist present trained in trauma-informed interviewing. It would be gentle, supportive. Marcus stood pacing to the window. Phoenix sprawled below millions of people going about their lives. Somewhere in that city, Jennifer Rose might be alive, or she might be dead, her body hidden where no one would find it. When he asked his back still to Morrison, "Tomorrow, I want to give Emma a bit more time to settle. Let her feel safer before we ask her to remember scary things." Marcus turned. "I want to be there. That's not protocol." "I don't care about protocol." Marcus cut her off. "Emma trusts me. If you want her to talk, I need to be there." Morrison studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, tomorrow afternoon, 2 o'clock." That evening, Marcus sat with Emma in her hospital room, reading from a picture book about a brave little mouse. Emma was curled up against her pillows, the teddy bear in her arms, her eyes following the illustrations. When he finished the story, Emma reached out and touched his hand. Just the briefest touch, her small fingers against his weathered skin. Marcus looked at her, this brave little girl who'd been through so much. "You okay, kid?" Emma nodded, then so quietly Marcus almost missed it, she whispered a single word. "Marcus." It was the first word she'd spoken since being rescued, and she'd used it to say his name. Marcus felt tears building in his eyes. He gently squeezed her hand. "Yeah, Emma, I'm right here." "Stay." Her voice was tiny, uncertain. "As long as you need me," Marcus promised. "I'm not going anywhere." Emma's eyes drifted closed, exhaustion finally claiming her. But her hand remained in Marcus's, holding on like he was her anchor in a storm-tossed sea. Marcus sat there long into the night watching Emma sleep and wondering how he'd become so deeply connected to a child he had only known for a few days. But he knew the answer. Emma had given him something precious, a chance to be the person he should have been 8 years ago, a chance to save someone instead of walking away. And he would do everything in his power to make sure she was safe, to find her mother, to give her back the life that had been stolen from her, even if it meant facing the darkness that had taken her in the first place. The next afternoon, Dr. Sarah Chen arrived at the hospital, a child psychologist specializing in trauma. She was in her 30s with warm eyes and an easy manner that immediately put Marcus at ease. "I've reviewed Emma's case," Dr. Chen said, meeting with Marcus, Sarah Mitchell, and Agent Morrison before the interview. "What we're asking of her today is difficult, but it could be crucial. I'll go slowly, let her control the pace. If she needs to stop, we stop." They gathered in a private room softer and more comfortable than Emma's hospital room. Emma sat on Marcus's lap, the teddy bear clutched tight, her eyes wary. Dr. Chen pulled out some paper and crayons. "Emma, we're going to talk about some things that might be scary, but you're safe here and you can stop anytime you want." "Okay," Emma nodded, her fingers twisting the teddy bear's fur. "Can you tell me about the last day you were with your mommy?" Dr. Chen asked softly. Emma's body tensed. Marcus felt it, her small frame going rigid against him. "It's okay," Marcus murmured. "I'm right here." Emma's voice, when it came, was barely audible. "Mommy was working." "At the hospital?" Dr. Chen prompted gently. A nod. "And then what happened?" Emma's breathing quickened. "Man came. Bad man." Marcus exchanged glances with Morrison. "What did the bad man do?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "He took Mommy, put her in a car." I screamed, "But he took me too." The room was silent except for Emma's quiet crying. "You were so brave," Dr. Chen said, her own eyes wet. "Can you tell me where the bad man took you?" "Big house, in the desert." Emma wiped her eyes. "Mommy cried. I was scared." "Was your mommy hurt?" Morrison asked carefully. Emma shook her head. "She said, 'Don't be scared.' Said she'd keep me safe." "Did you see other people at the house?" Detective Brooks asked. Emma nodded. Other kids, sad kids. Marcus felt rage building in his chest, hot and consuming. How many children had been through that house? How many were still there? Dr. Chen placed a gentle hand on Emma's arm. Emma, this is very important. Do you remember when you left that house, when the man took you away from your mommy? Emma's tears came harder now. Mommy fought, tried to stop him, but he was too strong. He put me in a car. I called for Mommy, but she couldn't come. She buried her face against Marcus's chest, her small body shaking with sobs. That's enough, Marcus said firmly, his arms tightening around Emma protectively. Morrison looked like she wanted to protest, but one look at Emma's distress stopped her. You did so good, Emma, Dr. Chen said softly. So good. And guess what? Those people you told us about, we're going to stop them. We're going to make sure they can't hurt any more kids. Emma looked up, her face blotchy and wet. Mommy. Morrison knelt down beside Marcus's chair, meeting Emma's eyes. We think we know where your mommy is, and tonight we're going to bring her home. Emma's eyes widened. Really, really, Morrison promised. And when we do, you'll be the first person she sees. For the first time since Marcus had met her, Emma smiled. A real smile, bright and hopeful, and full of the joy that had been stolen from her. The raid was scheduled for 8 p.m. after dark. Marcus wasn't allowed to be present, he wasn't law enforcement, and this was a dangerous operation. But Morrison promised to call him the moment they had Jennifer. Marcus spent the hours waiting at the hospital with Emma distracting her with stories and games. Every time the clock hand moved, Emma's eyes would flick to it, counting down the minutes. At 8:30, Marcus's phone rang, Morrison's number. He answered, his heart pounding. Yeah, we got her. Morrison's voice was thick with emotion. Jennifer's alive, injured, traumatized, but alive. We're bringing her to Phoenix Memorial. Marcus closed his eyes, relief washing over him. Emma, bring her. Jennifer's asking for her. The drive to Phoenix Memorial was a blur. Emma sat in the back seat with Sarah, bouncing with nervous energy, asking questions faster than anyone could answer them. Will Mommy remember me? What if she's mad I ran away? Is Marcus staying? To the last question, Marcus turned in the passenger seat and met Emma's eyes. As long as you need me, kid. Phoenix Memorial's emergency entrance was controlled chaos. FBI vehicles, police cars, ambulances. Agent Reeves met them at the door. Jennifer's in room 3, he said. Doctors say she'll make a full recovery, physically anyway. He led them through the ER to a curtained-off area. Morrison stood outside looking exhausted but triumphant. Emma, she said, kneeling down, your mom has some bruises and she's very tired. But she's so excited to see you. Are you ready? Emma nodded, grabbing Marcus's hand. They pushed through the curtain. Jennifer Rose sat propped against pillows, her left arm in a sling, bruises marking her face. But her eyes, they were Emma's eyes, the same blue, the same shape. And when she saw Emma, those eyes filled with tears. Baby, she whispered, her voice breaking. Oh, my baby. Emma froze for just a moment, staring at the mother she'd been torn from. Then she ran, nearly throwing herself into Jennifer's arms. Jennifer caught her with her good arm, pulling Emma close, sobbing into her daughter's hair. I thought I'd never see you again. I thought, Mommy, Emma cried, clinging to her. I was so scared. I know, baby, I know. But you're safe now. We're both safe. Marcus stepped back, giving them space. He felt hands on his shoulders. Sarah, who'd become more than just a waitress from a diner. She was family now, bound by the shared mission of saving this child. Together, they watched the reunion they'd helped make possible. Morrison joined them, her professional mask slipping to show genuine emotion. Brenner's information was good. We found Jennifer and 8 other victims at that compound, all alive. And we arrested 12 members of the organization, including someone they're calling the broker. Lawrence Donovan, a lawyer from Scottsdale. Will they talk? Sarah asked. They're already talking, Morrison said with satisfaction. Trying to make deals. But between Brenner and the evidence we seized, we've got them cold. Marcus watched Emma and Jennifer, mother and daughter, reunited against impossible odds. Dr. Chen was with them now, speaking softly, beginning the long process of healing. Marcus. He turned to see Jennifer looking at him, her daughter still in her arms. Agent Morrison told me what you did, Jennifer said, her voice thick with emotion. How you saved Emma. Marcus shook his head. Emma saved herself. I just happened to be there. Jennifer reached out her hand. Marcus stepped forward, taking it gently. Thank you, Jennifer whispered. Thank you for seeing her, for not looking away. Marcus felt tears building in his own eyes, 8 years of guilt and regret finally beginning to lift. She's an amazing kid. Emma looked up at him from her mother's embrace. Marcus is my friend. He promised he'd stay. Jennifer smiled through her tears. Then he's always welcome in our home. As the night wore on, the adrenaline faded, leaving behind exhaustion and relief. Jennifer was admitted for observation, and Emma refused to leave her side. The doctors understood, helping to arrange for Emma to stay in her mother's room. Marcus found himself in the hospital cafeteria at midnight, nursing terrible coffee and trying to process everything that had happened. Sarah found him there. Quite a week. Yeah. You did good, Marcus. You know that, right? Marcus thought about Jessica Morgan, about the choice he'd made 8 years ago to walk away, about how different things might have been if he'd acted then like he acted now. I did what I should have done a long time ago, he said quietly. Maybe, Sarah agreed, but you did it this time. That counts for something. Agent Morrison appeared carrying her own cup of terrible coffee. Mind if I join you? They made room. Morrison sat with a heavy sigh. Brenner's singing like a canary, she said, gave us enough information to bring down trafficking operations in 7 states. The FBI's calling it one of the biggest busts in a decade. How many kids? Marcus asked. Rescued 47, still missing, and now actively being searched for another 32. Morrison met his eyes. Because you picked up a napkin. The weight of that hit Marcus hard. Dozens of children saved because he'd paid attention. Because he'd chosen to act instead of turning away. We're going to need you to testify, Morrison continued, when this goes to trial, about what you saw at the diner, how Emma signaled for help. I'll be there, Marcus said without hesitation. Morrison smiled. I know you will. A week later, Marcus stood in the doorway of Jennifer and Emma's apartment in Phoenix. They'd been released from the hospital 3 days ago, and while the physical wounds were healing, the psychological ones would take longer. But they were healing, together. You didn't have to bring groceries, Jennifer said, but she was smiling as she took the bags from Marcus's arms. Figured you could use some help, Marcus replied, following her inside. The apartment was small but comfortable, filled with warm light and the photos Jennifer had salvaged from storage. Pictures of Emma as a baby, of Jennifer and her late husband, of happier times. Emma appeared from her bedroom wearing pajamas with cartoon characters and holding the teddy bear Marcus had given her. Marcus. She ran to him and he scooped her up. Hey kid, how you doing? Good. Dr. Chen came today. We drew pictures. Yeah, what did you draw? Emma pulled a folded paper from her pajama pocket and handed it to Marcus. He unfolded it carefully. It showed 3 stick figures, 2 larger, 1 small, standing in front of a building that might have been a diner. Above them, Emma had written in careful letters, "My heroes." Marcus felt his throat tighten. This is really good, Emma. That's you. Emma pointed to one of the larger figures. And that's Sarah, and that's me, when you saved me. Jennifer came to stand beside them, her hand resting on Emma's shoulder. She talks about you constantly, about how brave you were, how you kept your promises. I just did what anyone— Stop, Jennifer interrupted gently. Not anyone, you. You chose to see my daughter when most people would have looked away. You chose to stay when it would have been easier to leave. That's not nothing, Marcus. Marcus looked at Emma and at Jennifer, at the life they were rebuilding from the ashes of trauma. He thought about the man he'd been, the guilt he'd carried, the person he was becoming. I'm starting something, he said, suddenly the idea crystallizing as he spoke. A foundation for families of trafficking victims. Resources, support, legal help, whatever they need. Jennifer's eyes widened. Marcus, that's wonderful. I was thinking, he continued, looking at Emma, maybe you'd want to be involved. When you're older, help other kids who've been through what you went through. Emma considered this seriously. I could tell them it gets better. Yeah, Marcus said softly. You could. As the evening wore on, Marcus found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in years. Jennifer made dinner, simple pasta and salad, and they ate together, talking about Emma's upcoming return to school, about Jennifer's plans to go back to work, about the future. After dinner, Emma asked Marcus to read her a story. They settled on the couch, Emma curled against his side, and he read about brave knights and rescued princesses, changing the ending, so the princess saved herself. When Emma's eyes grew heavy, Jennifer carried her to bed. Marcus heard her singing a lullaby, soft and sweet, a mother's love in every note. Jennifer returned, sitting beside Marcus on the couch. She's out like a light. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the kind that exists between people who've been through something profound together. I've been thinking about the day she went missing, Jennifer said quietly. I've replayed it 1,000 times, looking for what I could have done differently. It wasn't your fault, Marcus said firmly. I know. Logically, I know that. But the guilt— She paused, gathering herself. The guilt is crushing. I was supposed to protect her. Marcus thought about Jessica Morgan, about 8 years of carrying his own guilt. I get it. Trust me, I get it. Jennifer looked at him curiously. Morrison mentioned you had a personal reason for helping Emma. She wouldn't say more. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, debating how much to share. Finally, 8 years ago, I saw a woman being hurt by a man. She looked at me, asking for help without words. And I walked away. Jennifer's hand found his, squeezing gently. 2 days later, she was dead, Marcus continued, his voice rough. And I spent 8 years knowing I could have saved her if I'd just acted. So when you saw Emma— I saw a second chance, Marcus finished. A chance to be the person I should have been the first time. Jennifer was quiet, processing this. Then, her name was Jessica Morgan. I looked her up after Morrison mentioned it. You couldn't have known what would happen. But I knew something was wrong, and I chose to ignore it. And you've been punishing yourself ever since. Jennifer's voice was gentle but firm. Marcus, what happened to Jessica was tragic, but it wasn't your responsibility to save her. Just like what happened to Emma wasn't my responsibility to prevent. Marcus looked at her, seeing the pain and wisdom in her eyes. We can't control everything, Jennifer continued. We can't save everyone, but we can choose to act when we're able. We can choose to help when help is needed. And you did that. For Emma, for me, for all those other children the FBI rescued. It doesn't erase what I failed to do before. No, Jennifer agreed, but it matters anyway. You matter, Marcus. To Emma, to me, to everyone whose life you changed by choosing to see a little girl's cry for help. Marcus felt something shift inside him, a weight he'd been carrying for so long, finally beginning to lift. Not gone, no, that guilt would probably never fully disappear, but lighter, more bearable. Stay, Jennifer said, for coffee for a while. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. So Marcus stayed. They talked late into the night about healing and hope and second chances, about the foundation he wanted to start and the therapy they were both going through, about Emma's resilience in the long road ahead. When Marcus finally left, the Arizona night air was cool and clear. He climbed onto his motorcycle, but before starting the engine, he pulled out his phone and sent a text to Sarah. "Thank you for everything." Her response came quickly. "You did the hard part. I just made coffee." Marcus smiled, starting his bike. As he rode through the quiet Phoenix streets, he thought about the journey from that rainy afternoon in the Blue Mesa diner to this moment, about how one choice, one act of courage from a 5-year-old girl had changed everything. 6 months later, Marcus stood in a small office space in Phoenix surrounded by boxes and furniture that needed assembling. Sarah was there helping organize files. Agent Morrison had stopped by with a donation from the FBI Victims Fund. The Emma Rose Foundation was officially open. Named after the brave little girl who'd written "help" on a napkin and trusted a stranger to see it. The foundation would provide resources for trafficking victims and their families, counseling, legal aid, housing assistance, whatever they needed to rebuild their lives. Marcus's phone rang. "Jennifer." "Turn on channel 3, she said, excitement in her voice. Marcus found a TV among the boxes and switched it on. The local news was running a story about the trafficking bust 6 months later. Images of Lawrence Donovan and Kyle Brenner being led away in handcuffs, interviews with FBI agents about the scope of the operation, and then a face Marcus knew well, Jennifer Rose speaking to the camera with quiet strength. "My daughter and I are alive today because a man named Marcus Stone chose to pay attention," Jennifer said. "He saw Emma asking for help and he didn't look away. That choice saved our lives and the lives of dozens of other children. Now through the Emma Rose Foundation, he's helping other families heal from the trauma of trafficking." The camera cut to footage of Emma, now 6 years old, playing in a park, laughing, running, being a normal kid. "We want other families to know there's hope," Jennifer continued, "that healing is possible, that they're not alone." Marcus felt tears building in his eyes. Sarah put her hand on his shoulder, squeezing gently. The news segment ended with information about the foundation, how to donate, how to get help. Marcus's phone immediately started buzzing with calls and messages, people wanting to volunteer to donate, to share their own stories. "You did it," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "You really did it." But Marcus shook his head. "Emma did it. She was brave enough to ask for help. I just finally learned to listen." That evening, Marcus drove to Jennifer and Emma's apartment for their weekly dinner. It had become a tradition over the past months, a way to stay connected and support each other. Emma met him at the door, throwing her arms around his waist. "Marcus, did you see us on TV?" "I did. You look like a movie star." Emma giggled, pulling him inside. "Mom made your favorite." The apartment smelled like pot roast and home. Marcus had never been one for domestic life, but these weekly dinners had become the highlight of his week. After dinner, Emma showed Marcus her latest drawing, a picture of the foundation's office with stick figures of Marcus and Sarah helping other families. "For the wall at work," Emma said proudly. "It's perfect," Marcus told her, "front and center where everyone can see it." As bedtime approached, Emma asked the question she asked every week. "Will you read to me?" "You know I will." They settled on the couch, Emma in her pajamas with the teddy bear that was more worn now from constant love. Marcus read from a chapter book they were working through together, doing voices for the characters. When Emma's eyes grew heavy, Jennifer carried her to bed. Marcus heard their quiet conversation. Jennifer's whispered, "I love you." And Emma's sleepy, "Love you too, Mommy." Jennifer returned, settling beside Marcus with 2 cups of coffee. "She's been asking about visiting Jessica Morgan's grave," Jennifer said quietly. "She wants to leave flowers." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Yeah. She says you saved her because someone couldn't save Jessica. She wants to say thank you." Jennifer's eyes were gentle. "Would you take her? I think it would help. Both of you." Marcus thought about Jessica, about the guilt he'd carried for so long, about redemption and healing and the strange winding path that had led him here. "Yeah," he said finally, "I'll take her." A week later, Marcus and Emma stood in a quiet Nevada cemetery, the desert sun warm on their faces. Jessica Morgan's grave was simple, marked by a modest headstone. Emma held a bouquet of wildflowers, her small hand tight in Marcus's. "Is this her?" Emma asked softly. "Yeah, kid, this is her." Emma stepped forward, placing the flowers gently at the base of the headstone. She was quiet for a moment, then spoke in that serious way children have when saying something important. "Thank you for helping Marcus learn to help people, because he helped me, and now we're helping other kids together." Marcus felt tears streaming down his face, 8 years of grief and guilt finally finding release. Emma took his hand again, looking up at him with wise eyes. "It's okay to be sin. Dr. Chen says sad feelings need to come out." Marcus knelt down, pulling Emma into a hug. "You're the smartest kid I know." They stayed a while longer, Marcus telling Emma about Jessica, about how she'd loved sunflowers and had dreams of going to college, making Jessica real, not just a symbol of his failure, but a person who'd mattered. As they walked back to his motorcycle, Emma asked, "Do you think Jessica would be happy about the foundation and everything?" Marcus thought about it, looking at the desert sky, vast and endless. "Yeah, Emma, I think she would be." Emma smiled, that bright, beautiful smile that had become more common in recent months. "Good, because we're helping lots of people. You and me and Sarah and Mom. We're making sad things better." Out of the mouths of babes, Marcus thought, lifting Emma onto his bike for the ride back. The Emma Rose Foundation grew over the following years. Marcus poured his energy into it, learning about nonprofit management and fundraising and all the things he never thought he'd care about. Sarah became the foundation's operations director, managing the day-to-day, while Marcus did outreach and advocacy. Agent Morrison joined their board, using her FBI connections to help them reach families in need. And Emma, she became their inspiration. As she grew older, she began speaking at events, telling her story with courage that left audiences in tears. She advocated for stronger trafficking laws and better support for victims. On Emma's 10th birthday, the foundation threw her a party at their expanded office space. Families they'd helped came to celebrate, children who'd been rescued playing with balloons and eating cake. Marcus stood beside Jennifer, watching Emma laugh with her friends. "She's amazing," Jennifer said, pride evident in her voice. "She gets it from her mom," Marcus replied. Jennifer bumped his shoulder gently. "She gets it from all of us, her family." Family. Marcus turned the word over in his mind. He'd spent most of his life believing he didn't need one, that the Hells Angels Brotherhood was enough. But these people who'd been brought together by trauma and had chosen to build something beautiful from it, this was family too. Emma ran over her friends, trailing behind. "Marcus, tell them about the diner." Marcus laughed. "What do you want me to tell them? How I was brave and wrote the note." As he got pulled into telling the story for the delighted children, embellishing it slightly to make Emma's role even more heroic, Marcus caught Jennifer's eye. She mouthed, "Thank you," and Marcus understood. "Thank you for seeing Emma. Thank you for staying. Thank you for being family." 5 years later, Marcus stood on a stage at a national conference on human trafficking. The room was filled with law enforcement, social workers, advocates, and survivors. He'd been asked to speak about the Emma Rose Foundation and its work, but as he looked out at the crowd, he knew he needed to talk about something more fundamental. 15 years ago, he began, his voice carrying through the room. I made a choice that haunted me for 8 years. I saw someone who needed help and I walked away. Her name was Jessica Morgan, and 2 days later, she was murdered. The room was silent. I carried that guilt for years, told myself I was just one person, that I couldn't have made a difference. But I was wrong. One person paying attention, one person choosing to act can change everything. He pulled out a worn piece of paper from his pocket, the original napkin Emma had written on, preserved in a plastic sleeve. This napkin has 4 letters on it. Help, written by a 5-year-old girl who was brave enough to ask a stranger for assistance. I could have ignored it, told myself it wasn't my business. But I'd learned my lesson 8 years before. I'd learned that looking away has consequences. Marcus's voice grew stronger. The Emma Rose Foundation has helped over 300 families in the past 5 years. We've provided counseling, legal aid, housing, education support. We've watched children who were trafficked grow into strong young people who are changing the world. He looked to the audience where Emma sat now, 15 years old, confident and bright. But it all started with one choice: to see, to act, to stay. Marcus held up the napkin. Every single person in this room has the power to make that choice. To be the person who notices when something's wrong, who speaks up when others stay silent, who helps when it would be easier to walk away. The room erupted in applause, but Marcus's eyes were on Emma, who was smiling at him with pride and love. After the conference, Emma found Marcus in the hallway. She'd grown tall, her blonde hair now long and styled, but her eyes were still the same bright blue that had looked at him with desperate hope 15 years ago. That was a good speech, she said, hugging him. Learn from the best, Marcus replied, returning the embrace. They walked outside together, the evening air cool and pleasant. Emma pulled out her phone, showing Marcus something. I got accepted, she said, barely containing her excitement. To the social work program at ASU, full scholarship. Marcus felt pride swelling in his chest. Emma, that's incredible. I want to do what you do, help people who have been hurt, make sure they know they're not alone. Emma's expression grew serious. You showed me that one person can make a difference. Now I want to be that person for someone else. Marcus pulled her into another hug, this one longer, tighter. Your mom would be so proud. I'm so proud. You're going to cry, Emma teased, but her own eyes were wet. Damn right I am. They stood together, watching the sunset paint the Phoenix sky in shades of orange and pink. Two people brought together by trauma, bound by choice, transformed by love. Thank you, Emma said softly, for seeing me, for staying, for being my family. Marcus felt tears sliding down his weathered face. Thank you for being brave enough to ask for help, for showing me what courage really looks like. As they stood there, Marcus thought about the journey from that rainy afternoon at the Blue Mesa Diner to this moment, about all the lives changed, the families helped, the hope restored, all because a little girl wrote 4 letters on a napkin, all because a broken man chose to see them. And in choosing to see, he'd found not just redemption, but something far more precious. He'd found a reason to believe that the world could be better, that one person could make a difference, that it was never too late to become the person you were meant to be. The rain had stopped years ago, but its memory remained. A reminder of the day everything changed. The day Marcus Stone stopped running from his past and started building a future. A future where every child who asked for help would find someone brave enough to answer. A future where no one had to carry their pain alone. A future built on four simple letters and the courage it took to write them. Help. And someone had helped. Someone had stayed. Someone had cared enough to make a difference. That was all it took to change the world. One person, one choice, one moment of courage, and everything that came after.